This is a narrated video of the evaluation of UNESCO work in the thematic area of media and information literacy. The video has as main objective to acquaint external people to the evaluation on which have been the process, main outcomes, conclusions and recommendations of the evaluation. The three main purposes of this evaluation were to collect and assess UNESCO's information on meal interventions, which was one of the first challenges and limitations of this evaluation. Second, to identify the position of UNESCO in the meal international arena. And thirdly, to assist strategic decision-making both internally and externally. The scope of this evaluation covered 3 biennia from 2014 to 2019 globally. Regarding meal background information, it is important to note that the number of interventions implemented in the thematic area were quite important, with 103 interventions in 52 countries, and however the resources available throughout the 3 biennia were very scarce, with less than $4.5 million USD for the 6 years. As well, median intervention was averaging 8,000 USD, so this shall be taken into account when reading the report. For implementing this evaluation, we use 3 main approaches. First, a theory-based approach that guided the whole evaluation. We mocked a theory of change at the very beginning and we tested it throughout the evaluation process. You can find it in the annexes of the report. Secondly, a participatory approach, and thirdly, a utilization focus and capital learning approach by which all products were deemed to be used and for the momentum of the meal thematic area. The sample covered through the evaluation includes 107 informants from different clusters of stakeholders, donors, UNESCO field offices, member states, headquarters, meal partners, and other stakeholders. We address and target all these stakeholders through different means, including interviews, online questionnaires, focus groups, and a panel of experts. Main limitations of the evaluation were the COVID-19 pandemic that limited the face-to-face interaction, and all country case studies and interviews were carried out remotely. And then as well, the second biggest one was the overall evaluability of the meal thematic area, with almost no good data available on indicators. No smart indicators were available. The other limitations are more common to other evaluations, which include the wide scope versus the resources for the evaluation, especially considering that this is implemented globally with many different pillars, response rates, and then the depth of lessons learned and most significant change questionnaires because of respondents' fatigue. The first evaluation dimension we looked at was external coherence, and within this dimension, first thing was to see whether the action of UNESCO in the different field offices and from headquarters correlated to those of member states, and how was meal located in terms of political agenda in the different member states. So first thing we found was that there are multiple policy entry points for meal in the member states. So many different understandings. Here with the laser you see that, for example, at the bottom you have the different potential policy entry points, and this is the degree of use of these policy entry points on average by all member states. So there are many different understandings and many different angles from where to approach meal in the countries. As well, another important finding is that UNESCO is actually highly correlated, because UNESCO is as well using many different policy entry points, and they are using them at field office level in a highly correlated way to the way used at member states. Even this is not one of the objectives of UNESCO, because the objective is to set standards. As well, one very, very important finding, I would say the most important one, is that UNESCO is holding currently the intellectual lead in the area, and that as well, now you see here all the potential niches of action, the difference between the degree of use by field offices and member states. There are high demands, and even expectations from member states to UNESCO to move forward in the field, in the different policy entry points depending on the region and depending on the country. As well, another important finding is that the added value or the perception of added value of UNESCO is very, very high because of its name, of course, but as well because of the resources developed in the area and because of the pool of experts that are available in UNESCO. As well, final key finding of this evaluation is that UNESCO is the locus, is at the very epicenter, both at global and country level. In this dimension, we assess as well the relation of MIL with different sustainable development goals, and actually we saw that there is a link to many of them, to SDG 4 education, SDG 5 gender, SDG 8 employment, SDG 12 on responsible consumption, and SDG 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions. The point is that MIL is not currently being used or considered as a contributor to SDGs statistics within UNESCO. In all evaluation dimensions, we have included at the very end a synthesis tables of how much have the different indicators of the evaluation been reached by the MIL thematic area. In the external coherence, this synthesis table is presented here, and the first unit of assessment and the first evaluation indicator was harmonization and influence, and we have seen that it has been addressed highly by the MIL thematic area as well as the positioning in the MIL arena. Regarding the added value, it has been very, very high. And finally, on the Agenda 2030, the contribution to SDGs, this can be further improved. Now coming to the next evaluation dimension on internal coherence, we have seen in the evaluation how the theory of change, although not formal and visualized the way you are seeing it in this slide, is present in the thematic area of MIL with three main needs addressed, a set of at least 6 cluster activities, several type of outputs, and what is more important, several operational implementation standards. Summing up all findings in the internal coherence dimension, we have seen that the intervention logic is very good, though it still needs to be further visualized for all stakeholders to understand it. Resource-wise balance, as we have seen at the beginning, is very, very low, with almost no resources available throughout the 3 biennia. In-house synergies, there are good examples of synergies and collaborations within UNESCO sectors and sections and divisions, but they are still to be further developed. And regarding global priorities, although there is a good focus on Africa and there is a natural correlation with gender, this is still to be fully developed. The next evaluation dimension we have covered is effectiveness, and what we have seen is that the wealth of outputs relate to a different set of outcomes that are not fully visualized and formalized in UNESCO strategic documentation. As well, the impacts are not measured, and although there is a wealth of potential SDGs that can be addressed, we do not know right now which of them are actually best addressed. Summing up all the units of assessment of the dimension of effectiveness, we see that outputs quality and achievement is high and even very high, especially taking into account the resources available. The expected outcomes have been completely achieved, though remember that they are quite vague and almost not measurable. And regarding unexpected outcomes, but putting them in context with the resources available, we can say that they are very high. In terms of impacts, we do not know what happens afterwards, so we cannot answer the question to so what. Fourth evaluation dimension has been partnership, and we have seen that UNESCO is positioned at the epicenter of what is happening at country level, but as well at international level. At country level, this slide represents the average net of partners of a field office, and we have seen that the width is around 10 members, that the depth of intensity of interaction is, however, still incipient with 1.45 out of 5, that the breadth includes UN agencies, ministries, private sector, and key constituencies, and that the typology, that meaning what type of interaction they have with partners, is multifunction, meaning you can see here that they use different partners for these different potential interactions, including resource mobilization, joint advocacy, program implementation, and knowledge sharing. UNESCO is as well located at international level through two international partnerships set up: GAPMIL, which is a multi-stakeholder with more than 500 members, and MILIT, which is part of UNITWIN with 24 universities specialized on MIL. However, we have seen during the evaluation that there are several challenges regarding the operational management that need to be put in the context of no resources available to develop these networks. In terms of representativeness, there are around 500 members, as we just said, representative of all regions, especially Europe and African Asian, and as well including different type of stakeholders, CSOs, universities, public bodies, and a bit of governmental public bodies. Main summary of this dimension is that the alignment with the partnership strategy of UNESCO is high, and I would say even very high, and the achievements of setting up these two networks is amazing within the frame of the resources available. However, operational features are not satisfactory nowadays, and new actions shall be taken promptly to fully utilize the potential of this. Last evaluation dimension is knowledge management, where we have seen that knowledge has an historical background in the MIL thematic area, and that is reflected in the resources that have been provided. However, these resources are not being used, practically speaking and pragmatically speaking, at field office level. In terms of assumptions, those related to the theory of change, we have seen that they are rich and varied, and that they are known and well managed, but mainly at headquarters level. Finally, in terms of lessons learned, we have seen that there are very good niches of knowledge. Here you see in the graph different niches where knowledge have been spotted, and several lessons on how to drive interdisciplinary drivers and hindrances. However, these lessons and this knowledge is not currently shared at field office level. Summing up the assessment of knowledge management, we see that there are no information management systems, but not only in the MIL thematic area, in UNESCO as a whole, and therefore knowledge management is not there, and evidence-based decision-making enriched by lessons learned is not fully present. Assumptions of the theory of change are quite well known and managed at headquarters level, but not at field office level. In terms of lessons learned, there are good niches of knowledge, however, still not shared for new officers coming in the field. Key evaluation conclusions are the following. From external coherence is that UNESCO is holding the intellectual lead. However, new efforts shall be taken in order to continue linking MIL to Sustainable Development Goals. From internal coherence, there is a rich internal strategy. However, new actions are to be taken in terms of interdisciplinary approach, in terms of resources, this shall be underpinned, and in terms of prioritization, being formally acknowledged and visible in the strategies. The third dimension, effectiveness, we have seen that all formal outcomes are reached. However, these formal outcomes are very vague and not representative and reflective of what is MIL doing. As well, we are not able nowadays to answer the question on so what? What is happening after the people get acquainted with MIL competencies? In terms of the dimension of partnership, this is one of the main outcomes of the MIL thematic area. Multi-stakeholder partnerships are one of the most outstanding added values, and there is now a good momentum for further development. Finally, and in terms of knowledge management, knowledge relies on expertise and know-how that has been developed for a long number of years. And this is reflected in resources, but these resources are too academic and are not being used by field officers and officers that implement interventions at country level. Therefore, a new information system and a new knowledge management system is needed to better support decision making. Finally, recommendations linked to findings and conclusions have been divided in different clusters. First recommendation shall be to prioritize the middle area within UNESCO. If it is to be upscaled, then we have as well spotted 3 different sensitive intervention points, as you see in the slide: communication, the upgrade of the international partnerships, and as well monitoring and evaluation and knowledge management. As well, in terms of foresighting, we propose a millet think tank, and in terms of operational related recommendations, we recommend using thematic working groups for interdisciplinary boost, repositioning UNESCO within the UN family, and as well boost the Leave No One Behind principle and sustainable development goal. We thank you very much for attending the presentation, and we remain available for any queries you may have in the contact details available in the slide.